Where did you get that uniform?
I earned it.
Take it off.
I'm a Navy SEAL.
No, you're not.
Call it in. Verify it.
Hands on the car.
If you do this, there's no fixing what happens next.
Nobody listening that morning realized they were watching a $750,000 mistake unfold in real time. And the most dangerous part wasn't the badge, or the gun, or even the accusation. It was certainty. The kind of certainty that makes a man ignore warnings, silence doubt, and double down when he should walk away. If you think you already know how this ends, you don't. And before we go any further, pay attention, because what happens next could change how you see power, authority, and the cost of being wrong. Bruce didn't flinch, not when John spoke calmly, not when he stood still, not even when the tension in the air shifted so sharply it felt like something invisible had just snapped. Bruce had made up his mind, and in his world, that was enough. "Turn around," Bruce barked, already reaching for John's wrist. John didn't resist, but he didn't comply either. His eyes stayed locked on Bruce, steady, controlled, almost surgical. "You still have time to fix this," John said quietly. That should have been the moment Bruce paused. It should have been the moment he asked a question. Instead, it became the moment everything escalated. Because Bruce wasn't just seeing a man in uniform. He was seeing a problem to solve, a narrative he had already built in his head. Suspicious, out of place, probably lying. And once that narrative locked in, every action John took only confirmed it. Even the calmness, especially the calmness. "Stop talking," Bruce snapped, forcing John against the car. The metal thud echoed louder than it should have, drawing attention from the small crowd forming nearby. 2 civilians slowed, then 3 more. Phones came out. John exhaled slowly, cheek pressed against the vehicle, hands now restrained. "You're making a mistake," he said again. Bruce leaned closer, voice low, almost irritated now. "You think I haven't heard that before?" That was the problem. He had, too many times. And in Bruce's experience, people who said that were usually guilty of something. But John wasn't shifting, wasn't panicking, wasn't bargaining. He was waiting. That's what unsettled one of the bystanders, a woman standing just beyond the curb. She whispered to the man beside her, "Why does he look like that?" "Like what?" the man asked. "Like he already knows what's going to happen." Bruce tightened the cuffs. Click. That sound, small, mechanical, final, sealed something bigger than either of them fully understood yet. Because here's what most people don't realize in moments like this. Authority doesn't just come from power. It comes from perception. And right now, Bruce had all of it. The badge, the voice, the control of the scene. But John had something else. Something invisible. Something Bruce couldn't see, because he wasn't looking. "You said call it in," Bruce mocked, stepping back. "All right, let's see what story you come up with next." He reached for his radio. For a split second, barely noticeable, John's jaw tightened. Not fear, not anger. Something closer to inevitability. "Do it," John said. Bruce keyed the radio, posture relaxed now, almost confident. Dispatch crackled back. Routine, controlled, predictable. Everything Bruce expected. Everything he trusted. But as he began to speak, one small detail shifted. John's name. It wasn't hesitation, it wasn't uncertainty, it was recognition. And Bruce didn't catch it, not yet. Because in his mind, this was already over. He had the suspect. He had control. He had the story. What he didn't have was the truth. And by the time that truth finished catching up to him, it wouldn't just challenge his authority. It would destroy it. As Bruce waits for dispatch to respond, convinced he's exposing a fraud, the system on the other end has already flagged John's identity at a level Bruce doesn't even have clearance to understand, turning a routine arrest into the beginning of a career-ending collapse. What happens when the man you just cuffed isn't just telling the truth, but outranks the consequences you're about to face? The radio didn't respond the way Bruce expected. There was no immediate confirmation, no casual dismissal, no quick validation of his assumption. Instead, silence. Not empty silence, the kind that stretches just long enough to feel wrong. Bruce frowned, pressing the receiver tighter. Dispatch, confirm identity. Name, John. Claims Navy SEAL. A pause. Then a voice came back, but it wasn't the same operator. Unit requesting verification. Stand by. Different tone. Sharper. Controlled. Bruce's confidence didn't disappear, but it shifted, just slightly, like a crack forming beneath a solid surface. John noticed it instantly. You hear that? John asked quietly, still cuffed, still calm. Bruce ignored him, but the crowd didn't. Phones were higher now, closer, focused. Moments ago, it was curiosity. Now, it was anticipation, because something had changed, and everyone could feel it. Dispatch, what's the delay? Bruce pressed, irritation creeping in. Another pause, longer this time. Then, unit confirm. Did you say Lieutenant John Carter? Bruce blinked. Lieutenant? His grip on the radio tightened. He said Navy SEAL. I'm verifying that claim. Another voice cut in, not dispatch, higher authority, cold, direct. Officer, do not proceed further. Repeat, do not escalate the situation. That was the first real break. Bruce's jaw hardened. His eyes flicked to John, then back to the small crowd, then to the cuffs already locked in place. Too late to walk it back cleanly. Too many eyes, too much certainty already invested. You're telling me to stand down based on a name? Bruce shot back, voice lowering but sharpening. John shifted slightly against the car, not resisting, just enough to remind Bruce he was still there, still composed. You should listen, John said. And that did it. That quiet confidence, that unshaken tone. It didn't calm Bruce, it challenged him. Because here's what most people don't understand. When authority feels threatened, it doesn't retreat. It doubles down. Bruce exhaled slowly, decision locking in again. Negative. Subject is detained until I get full confirmation. The crowd murmured. That wasn't procedure. They could feel it, even if they didn't know it. The voice on the radio came back, firmer now. Officer, you are interfering with a federally protected individual. Remove the restraints immediately. That word hit differently. Federally. Protected. Bruce's pulse ticked upward, but his posture stayed rigid, because backing down now wouldn't just mean being wrong. It would mean being seen as wrong. And that, to Bruce, was worse. You're saying he's active? Bruce demanded. John finally turned his head slightly, enough for his voice to carry clearly. I told you to verify. No anger, no fear, just quiet finality. And that's when the second shift happened. Not in the radio, not in Bruce, in the crowd. Because now, they weren't watching a suspect. They were watching a mistake unfold. A big one. What Bruce thought was a simple identity check has now escalated into direct interference with a federally protected operative, meaning the situation is no longer local, and no longer under his control. But if Bruce still refuses to uncuff John after that warning, what happens when the people above dispatch decide to step in themselves? Bruce's world didn't collapse all at once. It tilted, just slightly, but enough to make everything feel off. The radio stayed in his hand, but now it felt heavier, like it carried more than just instructions, like it carried consequences. "Officer," the voice returned, sharper than before. "This is your final directive. Remove the restraints." Final directive. Those words don't get used lightly. But Bruce wasn't hearing authority anymore. He was hearing pressure. And pressure, to someone like him, felt like a challenge. "You still haven't confirmed his identity," Bruce pushed back, scanning the growing crowd. "I'm not releasing anyone based on vague orders." The mistake wasn't what he said. It was who he said it in front of. Because now every phone pointed at him wasn't just recording, it was documenting. John inhaled slowly, eyes forward. "Bruce," he said, calm but deliberate. That alone froze something in the air. Bruce never gave his name, not to John, not to anyone here. "How do you—" "Because I already know how this ends," John cut in quietly. No raised voice, no threat. Just certainty. And for the first time, Bruce felt it, that small, creeping doubt pressing against everything he thought he knew. But instead of stepping back, he stepped deeper in. "You're not in a position to say anything," Bruce snapped, though the edge in his voice wasn't as clean anymore. That's when the second patrol car pulled up. Not lights blazing, not sirens, just fast. Two officers stepped out, exchanging a look before approaching. They weren't rushing, but they weren't relaxed either. One of them leaned toward Bruce, voice low. "What's going on?" Bruce straightened. "Possible impersonation. Claims he's Navy SEAL. Dispatch is being unclear." The officer's expression shifted, just a flicker. Then he glanced at John, really looked at him. And in that moment, something clicked. Not recognition of a face, recognition of a type. The posture, the stillness, the complete absence of panic. "Bruce," the officer murmured, quieter now. "You might want to rethink this." That should have been enough, but it wasn't. Because backing down now didn't just mean admitting doubt, it meant admitting fault. And Bruce wasn't built for that. "You're telling me to just let him go?" Bruce challenged. "I'm telling you, this doesn't look like what you think it is." John exhaled again, almost like he'd been waiting for that exact line. Because here's what most people don't know. Elite military personnel are trained not just for combat, but for control under pressure. Heart rate steady, breathing regulated, emotional response suppressed. And John wasn't just calm by personality, he was engineered to be this way. Which meant the more intense the situation became, the calmer he got. And the worse Bruce looked. The radio crackled again, this time louder, cutting through everything. "Unit on scene, stand down immediately. Federal agents are en route." That landed, not just on Bruce, on everyone. Federal agents. Now the crowd wasn't murmuring, they were reacting. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was escalation. And Bruce was standing right at the center of it. Still holding the cuffs, still refusing to move. What Bruce thought was a local situation has now triggered a federal response, meaning the consequences are no longer theoretical. They're incoming. At this point, be honest, should Bruce uncuff him now, or has he already gone too far? The sound of tires approaching didn't come with sirens. It came with silence. Heavy, deliberate silence that cut through the murmurs of the crowd like a blade. Bruce felt it before he saw it. Two black SUVs rolled to a controlled stop near the edge of the scene. No rush, no chaos, just precision. Doors opened in sync. And everything changed. The men who stepped out didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to. Their presence alone shifted the balance of power in an instant. One of them walked straight toward Bruce, eyes locked, expression unreadable. "Officer," he said calmly, flashing credentials too fast for the crowd, but not too fast for Bruce. "Step away from him. Now." Not a suggestion, not a discussion. A command. Bruce hesitated, just for a second. But in moments like this, a second is everything. Because that hesitation confirmed something the agent already suspected. "This is your scene," Bruce replied, trying to hold ground. "But I need full clarification before I release." "Wrong," the agent cut in, voice still calm but edged with steel. "This stopped being your scene the moment you ignored a federal directive, because that hesitation confirmed something the agent already suspected." "This is your scene," Bruce replied, trying to hold ground. "But I need full clarification before I release." "Wrong," the agent cut in, voice still calm but edged with steel. "This stopped being your scene the moment you ignored a federal directive." That hit harder than anything before. Not because it was loud, but because it was final. Bruce glanced at John, still cuffed, still calm, still watching. No anger, no panic. Just patience. Like a man who had already seen this play out in his head. "You've made your point," Bruce said, but there was something different now, something thinner beneath the authority. "I just need confirmation on who exactly." "You're looking at a Tier 1 operator," the agent said flatly. "And right now, you're detaining him without cause." The words landed like a weight. Tier 1. Even the other officers shifted at that. Because that wasn't just military. That was the highest level. The kind of designation that doesn't get explained, it gets respected. Bruce's fingers tightened slightly around the cuffs. One last thread of control. One last chance to decide how this ends. Because here's the truth most people never realize. The moment you're given a chance to correct a mistake is the same moment you're being judged for making it. And Bruce had reached that moment. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he stepped forward. The agent didn't move, didn't help, didn't intervene. He just watched. Because this part mattered. The acknowledgement, the accountability. Bruce reached for the cuffs. Paused. Then finally, click. The metal released. John straightened, rubbing his wrist once, composed as ever. Free, but not finished. Because as the agent turned back to Bruce, his next words weren't relief. They were consequence. "We'll take it from here," he said. Freedom didn't feel like victory. Not yet. John rolled his shoulders once, the imprint of the cuffs still faintly visible on his wrist. He didn't look at Bruce right away. He looked at the crowd, at the phones, at the evidence. Because this was never just about being released. It was about what had already been done. The agent stepped slightly forward, positioning himself between John and Bruce, not as protection, but as separation. Clear, intentional. "Officer Bruce," he said calmly, "you'll remain on scene." Not a request, a hold. Bruce swallowed, the weight of everything finally pressing in. The crowd wasn't just watching anymore. They were judging. And for the first time, Bruce had no control over the narrative. "I was following procedure," Bruce said, quieter now, but still reaching for something to stand on. The agent didn't react immediately. Because here's what most people don't realize. Procedure doesn't protect you when you ignore escalation warnings. It exposes you. "You were given multiple lawful directives to disengage," the agent replied. "You chose not to." Each word was precise, measured, final. John finally turned, eyes meeting Bruce's, not with anger, but something far more unsettling. Clarity. "I told you there wouldn't be a way to fix it," John said. "No emotion, just fact." And that's what made it land. Bruce exhaled, but there was no argument left, no authority to lean on. Just a growing realization that every second of certainty earlier had built this exact moment. The agent signaled to another official who had already begun documenting everything: the cuffs, the patrol unit, the witnesses. "This incident is now under federal review," the agent continued, "effective immediately." That word, federal, echoed again, but this time it didn't feel distant. It felt personal. Because now, it wasn't about John proving who he was. It was about Bruce answering for what he did. And the consequences weren't theoretical anymore. They were structured, formal, expensive. John adjusted his uniform slightly, then stepped forward. Not aggressively, not triumphantly, just enough to close the distance. "You didn't see me," he said quietly. "You saw what you expected." Bruce looked up, but there was nothing left to counter that with. Because it was true. And truth doesn't argue. It settles. The agent's voice cut in one last time. "Legal will be in contact. I suggest you prepare a statement." Prepare. Not defend, not explain. Prepare. Because what comes next isn't a conversation. It's a process. One that doesn't forget. One that doesn't rush. And one that, in this case, ends with a number Bruce will never forget. $750,000. The real cost wasn't just the lawsuit. It was the irreversible moment Bruce chose certainty over verification, turning a routine stop into a career-defining collapse. If you were in that situation, would you have trusted your instinct like Bruce, or verified before it was too late?